Hello, I'm Father Joe Gambala, pastor of St. Malachy Catholic Church in Sterling Heights. Welcome to Saints of the Summer. Today's June the 7th. On one of my trips, this one was to Maine, I was climbing Mount Katahdin with my godson Brian and his wife and an old friend and my nephew Luke. Well, to climb Katahdin, it's about a mile high. It's at the end of the Appalachia Trail. And you have to get up before dawn and you start climbing and climbing and climbing. And it's a long, hard climb. And when we got halfway up, Luke went off to the side to an outhouse. There was a little spot there where there was an outhouse and a bench on this mountain pond. And he came out. We thought he was just, going to the bathroom. What we didn't notice, he was throwing up. He was not feeling well. He wasn't going to tell us because he knew we'd take him right back down the mountain if we thought he was ill. We continued climbing till we got to the top of the mountain. Now we were almost at the peak. We had about a quarter of a mile to go. It wasn't much more climbing. It was mostly level, just slightly up to the very tippity top. And Luke sat down, and he didn't look good at all. And our guide said, we better turn him around and head back. And Luke didn't want to head back. Luke was so close to the very top, he was going to, continue. And so, and Brian, who organized the trip, looked at him. He's Luke's cousin, and I'm Luke's uncle. And we looked at him, and we said, well, what are we going to do? And Brian says, well, I'm just his cousin. You're his uncle. And I says, yeah, but he lives in Georgia, and I live in, Michigan. I don't see him that much. I don't know what to do. And all I could hear in the fog that was swirling around, or I should say the cloud that was swirling around, was my sister getting upset that I got her son sick or something like that. And then, like a miracle, this lady comes walking right out towards us. She must have been in her 60s. She had a backpack on. She looked down at Luke and she said, son, you need more electrolytes. That's your problem. Here, drink this. Pulls out a bottle of Gatorade and gives it to Luke. And Luke downs the Gatorade, says, I feel fine. And we continued the walk. One simple act of kindness saved the day. One simple act of kindness. And today's saint, St. Robert of Newminster, is about kindness. He lived in 1100 to 1159 in Yorkshire, England. And he was a very bright man. He was sent to study in Paris and became a Benedictine monk and founded a famous abbey called Fountains Abbey. He didn't write any books. He didn't debate any great issues of theology. He never had to face anything like martyrdom, but he was remembered profoundly by being a very kind man. They elected him abbot, and yet he'd go out in the fields and work just as hard as the rest of the monks. And in the course of working, he would take a bucket, and of course he'd do everything by hand, and he'd dip it into the well, and he'd haul it up himself, and he'd bring the cold water back to his fellow monks so they'd have a cold drink. These acts of kindness became quite renowned. I think every one of us can remember someone being very kind to us. And that challenges all of us to think how often or how many more times we can be kind to others.